Hello, ladies. So today we are on day 1 of week 6, and this is our last week of the Seamless Bible Study. I can't believe we're already to the end of it. Seems like it's taken forever and that it's happened really quick. So, anyway, today's title is Paul's Journeys Begin. So, we're going to start learning a little bit more about Paul. In the book of Acts, we learned about Paul and briefly touched on how he traveled around preaching about Christ and urging people, especially Gentiles, to come to the faith. We're going to start out the session by looking at the order of his travels because I think that might be the best way to understand the next several books we are going to study. But, and I'm sorry about this, I have to warn you, we're going to go in chronological order. And if you recall, that's not necessarily how things show up in the Bible. I know it's tricky. We find the order from clues in letters themselves and from the story of spread of the faith in the book of Acts. Paul sets off with his unfortunately named partner in crime, Barnabas. On the first of 3 missionary journeys, he would later be joined by some other guys, Mark, Silas, and Timothy. I'm going to be honest here, the maps of Paul's journeys contain a lot of cities and a lot of details that run together in my mind, and I may never get to a place where I can name every single one of them in order on all 3 journeys. The good news, pun fully intended, is Jesus still loves me. So here's the basic scenario, and then we'll zoom in for more details. I know this is going to look like a lot of information, but bear with me. It helps so much to have the bird's eye view of these things. Note that for things like the order of the books or the date they were written, you'll find lots of opinions. I adapted these dates from George Guthrie's study called Read the Bible for Life. Don't think of them as dates in a history class. Rather, think of them as details you would remember about a good friend. It's all part of knowing somebody. Paul was born in Tarsus of Cilicia, AD 10. In Acts 22:3, you can see where that is. Jesus' death and resurrection took place about AD 29 or 30. So when Jesus died, Paul was about the age of a typical modern college student. Paul played cheerleader for the murder of Stephen. Then, while Paul was seeking to earn his merit badge for persecuting Christians, he encountered the resurrected Jesus sometime between AD 34 and 37. To see Paul's own description of what happened after he met Jesus, read Galatians 1:15 through 8. What 3 places did Paul go and how much time elapsed? So if you go to Galatians 1:15 through 8, it says, "But when it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb and called me by his grace to reveal his Son in me, that I might preach him among the heathen, immediately I conferred, not with the flesh and blood, neither went I up to Jerusalem to them which were apostles before me, but I went into Arabia and returned again unto Damascus. Then after 3 years I went up to Jerusalem to see Peter and abode with him 15 days. So he went to Arabia and then Damascus. That journey took him 3 years. After the 3 years, he went to Jerusalem for 15 days to see Peter. Some people have compared Paul's 3 years in Arabia and Damascus to the time many students spend in seminary. But in fact, Paul's whole life has been spent learning the Old Testament. The following chart combines the events of Paul's life with his approximate age for each event or missionary journey and the letters he wrote that became parts of our New Testament. I will just let each of you kind of look over that on your own. It talks about when he was born, crucifixion of Jesus was, when they stoned Stephen, when he was on the road to Damascus, his first journey, when he wrote Galatians, when he wrote 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, his second missionary journey, third missionary journey, when he wrote 1 Corinthians. I mean, it goes on and it tells each of these and what age he was at that time. Let's just go over it. Why not, right? Okay, so he was born, and it was AD 10 when he was born. So he was 0 years old. When Jesus was crucified, it was between AD 29 and 30. So he was around 20 years old. So the time of the stoning of Stephen, or when he was on the road to Damascus, when Paul actually got saved because Jesus blinded him. I think we're going to get into that in a minute. Sorry to jump ahead. But he was 24 years old when that happened. Then we don't hear anything from 37 to 46 AD. And then his first missionary journey was between 46 and 47 AD. He was 36 years old. Then some say that he wrote Galatians around this time, and you'll see it come up again in a minute. I guess they're unsure about it. I believe we talk about that here in a minute too. Okay, and then the Jerusalem Conference between AD 48 and 49. It's found in Acts 15 if you want to look that up. He was 38 years old. His second missionary journey from AD 50 to 52, he was around 40. After that, he wrote the book of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. It doesn't have an age beside that. But the next age is 43 when he began his missionary journey, third missionary journey. So he was between 40 and 43 whenever he wrote 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. Then, of course, his third missionary journey when he was 43. Then it says that he wrote, after that, 1 Corinthians. And this is where the second thought of he could have wrote Galatians around this time. Next age is 47 when he took his trip to Jerusalem with offering. After that, he was 47, I guess still, because when he was arrested and in prison for 2 years, in AD 57 through 59, he was 47. So in between there, he wrote 2 Corinthians and Romans. Then after his imprisonment, he takes his trip to Rome as a prisoner. When he's 50 years old, first Roman imprisonment, so he was actually imprisoned in Rome between AD 60 and 62. While he was in prison, he wrote Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon. When he was 54, he was released from prison. That was between AD 63 and 65. Then he writes 1 Timothy and Titus. Then his final imprisonment and martyrdom is between 66 and 67. He's 57 years old. And then comes 2 Timothy, or probably around that same time, because that would be the end. So she says down at the bottom, and I fully agree with her. No, not really. If you are any kind of Christian, you've memorized the events in this chart and are ready to move on. Of course, she's kidding, and so am I, because I won't remember much of that here in just a few minutes, actually. So on the next page, Angie says, kidding, I'm kidding. But seriously, I know that looks like a ton of facts and maybe you can't quite sort them out, but I want you to have it in front of you as we look at the rest of the Bible. Let's go in order. Understanding the Bible chronologically means we jump to 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. You can read about Paul's first missionary journey in Acts 13 through 14. He probably didn't write any letters during that first trip. Some scholars think he wrote Galatians. He was hanging out in the area we know as Turkey, which is Roman Asia and Galatia, and getting his bearings as traveling missionary. On his second missionary journey, described in Acts 15 and through 17, Paul with Timothy and Silas stopped in Thessalonica, Greece. After he left, he wrote them a letter to encourage them in their newfound faith. Because he had heard they seemed to be misunderstanding the return of Christ, Paul focused on setting the record straight. describe at least one promise Paul extended to these young believers in 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 18. So we'll read 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 18. But I would not have ye to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that ye sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, and the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words. So he's telling them that their loved ones who have died before them won't be left behind. They will rise again and join all together in the clouds to meet Jesus. And I've heard that those scriptures in preaching and everything, but I never realized that that was a comfort to them about their loved ones that had died before them. See, doesn't it make a little more sense now? Gracious, I'm praying it does. Paul handwrote the letter and had Timothy deliver it to the new church at Thessalonica, a short time after first coming to them. We can see that in 2 Thessalonians was written shortly after the first letter because Silas and Timothy are still with Paul. What emotions does 2 Thessalonians 2:2 suggest the people in the new church might have been feeling? So in 2 Thessalonians 2:2, it says that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. He's saying that they might feel shaken or troubled, thinking that the day of Christ coming back is here. You know, they're can be told this. They might receive letters saying that it's from them. It says, nor by letters as from us. Nobody knows that time. So he's telling them, don't be shaken or troubled, thinking that time is coming or is here. So Angie says, yeah, they're rattled. They don't understand the second coming of Christ. And Paul wants to set their minds at ease. That's the heart of both of these letters. After his stay in Athens, Paul traveled to Corinth. During Paul's lifetime, the city of Corinth was the commercial center of Greece. He spent a year and a half there establishing a church. Flip over to Acts 19 and read verses 1 through 11. Who did Paul stay with? Okay, so Acts 18, 1 through 11. After these things, Paul departed from Athens and came to Corinth, and found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately come from Italy. When his wife Priscilla, because that Claudius had commanded all Jews to depart from Rome, and came unto them, and because he was of the same craft, he abode with them, and wrought. For by their occupation they were tent makers. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath, and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks. And when Silas and Timotheus were come from Macedonia, Paul was pressed in the spirit and testified to the Jews that Jesus was Christ. And when they opposed themselves and blasphemed, he shook his raiment and said unto them, Your blood be upon your own heads. I am clean. From thenceforth I will go into the Gentiles. And he departed thence and entered into a certain man's house, named Justus, one that worshipped God, whose house joined hard to the synagogue. And Crispus, the chief ruler of the synagogue, believed on the Lord with all his house. And many of the Corinthians, hearing, believed and were baptized. Then spoke the Lord to Paul in the night by a vision. Be not afraid, but speak, and hold not thy peace, for I am with thee, and no man shall set thee on thee to hurt thee. For I have much people in this city. And he continued there 1 year and 6 months, teaching the word of God among them. So the answer to the question, who did Paul stay with, is Aquila and his wife Priscilla. Who is Paul testifying to at this point in his ministry? We read that in Acts 8:5. And in 8:5 it says, "And when Silas and Timotheus were come from Macedonia, Paul was pressed in the Spirit and testified to the Jews that Jesus was Christ." So he is testifying at this time to the Jews. What happens as a result of his frustration with them in Acts 18:6? Just read these, but I'm going to read them again just so we can kind of refresh on which verse is which. So Acts 18:6, "And when they opposed themselves and blasphemed, he shook his raiment and said unto them, Your blood be upon your own heads. I am clean. From henceforth, I will go unto the Gentiles." So what happened as a result was he goes to the Gentiles instead. He gives up and stops speaking to the Jews and moves on to the Gentiles. After starting the church in Corinth, Paul returned to report to his home church in Antioch. He soon sets out on his third trip to Asia and Europe. It lasts for about 4 years and is covered in Acts 18:23 through 21, verse 16. So Acts chapter 18, verse 23 to chapter 21, verse 16. Of course, I'm not going to read all that. You will need to do that on your own if you want to read all the details on that. On this third missionary journey, Paul wrote 1 Corinthians from Ephesus to address some of the many problems in that turbulent congregation. If you ever get discouraged with the imperfections among God's people, just read 1 Corinthians. Talk about a messed up bunch. Hoping the letter did some good, Paul sent a message to see how they were doing. The report came back saying, in essence, most everyone in the church gets what you're saying, but some of them just aren't really sure that you're an apostle. They say they don't know if they should believe you because you weren't one of the 12 that Jesus chose. So he writes another letter explaining that yes, he is an apostle, and no, he will not be back to visit them because of the pain he has caused. God bless him. Paul loves a little drama. He is legitimately making a case for himself, and he's not doing it delicately. Read 2 Corinthians 11:5 through 11. Tell me you can hear his voice trembling while he defends himself, but he's about to launch into the meat of his defense. Okay, 2 Corinthians 11:5 through 11. "For I suppose I was not a whit behind the very chiefest apostles, but though I be rude in speech, yet not in knowledge. But we have been thoroughly made manifest among you in all things. Have I committed an offense in abasing myself that ye might be exalted? Because I have preached to you the gospel of God freely. I robbed other churches, taking wages of them, to do you service. And when I was present with you and wanted, I was chargeable to no man. For that which was lacking to me, the brethren which came from Macedonia supplied. And in all things I have kept myself from being burdensome unto you, and so will I keep myself. As the truth of Christ is in me, no man shall stop me of this boasting in the regions of Achaia. Wherefore, because I love you not, God knoweth." Next, read 2 Corinthians 11:22 through 33. List a couple of things he says about himself because, my goodness, there are plenty. So in 2 Corinthians 11:22 through 33, "Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they the seed of Abraham? So am I. Are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I am more. In labors more abundant, in stripes above measure, in prisons more frequent, in deaths oft. Of the Jews 5 times received I 40 stripes save one. Thrice I was beaten with rods, once I was stoned, thrice I suffered shipwreck, a night and a day I have been in the deep, in journeyings often, in perils of water, in perils of robbers, in perils of mine own countrymen, in perils by the heathen, in perils by the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness and painfulness, in watchings often, in hunger and in thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness, beside those things that are without, that which cometh upon me daily, the care of all the churches. Who is weak? Am I not weak? Who is offended? And I burn not? If I must needs glory, I will glory of the things which concern my infirmities. The God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, which is blessed forevermore, knoweth that I lie not. In Damascus, the governor under Artaris, the king, kept the city of Damascus with a garrison, desirous to apprehend me, and through a window in a basket was I let down by the wall and escaped his hands. The man is on fire. He is everything you are and a bag of chips. He also almost got stoned to death. He had sleep issues and danger, lots and lots and lots of danger. I feel certain that Paul should stand a little PTSD therapy at this point. Ironically, the major point of the second letter to the Corinthians church is that they should be comforted by Christ. Oh, Paul, do we love you? Some scholars place the writings of the book of Galatians between the first and second letters to the Corinthian church. Evidently, Paul was short on hobbies. What happened in Galatians 2:11 through 14? By the way, Cephas is another name for Peter. So let's see, Galatians 2:11 through 14. But when Peter was come into Antioch, I withstood him to the face, because he was to be blamed. For before that certain came from James, he did eat with the Gentiles. But when they were come, he drew himself and separated himself, fearing them that which were of circumcision. And the other Jews dissembled likewise with him, insomuch that Barnabas also carried away with their dissimulation. But when I saw that they walked not uprightingly according to the truth of the gospel, I said unto Peter before them all, If thou, being a Jew, livest after the manner of Gentiles, and not as do the Jews, why compellest thou the Gentiles to live as do the Jews? So Paul gets on to Peter about his actions. Away from the Jews, he acted like a Gentile, but when the Jews came, he told the Gentiles to be like the Jews. He knew that they were united through the new covenant. Remember, Paul is preaching mostly to Gentiles, and Peter's audience is Jewish. We started to talk about this last week, but it's worth revisiting. Jews have to be circumcised, and all of a sudden, the Christians are facing a dilemma. Do Gentiles who believe in Christ have to be circumcised as well? I'm willing to bet that if we went to a vote, we would see a unanimous response. But fortunately, we don't have to do that because Christ gives us the answer and Paul reveals it. Based on Galatians 2:16, what justifies a person? So in Galatians 2:16, it says, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ. Even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ, and not by the works of the law. But by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. So what justifies a person? The faith in Jesus Christ, not the works, not by living by the law. It's a new day. The yoke of slavery that came with the law has been released from our necks, and Christ has come to save us and set us free from all those requirements. Read Galatians 5:2 through 6. What's the heart of the passage? It's the main message of the book of Galatians, right here. So in Galatians 5:2 through 6, behold, I, Paul, say unto you, that if ye be circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing. For I testify again to every man that is circumcised, that he is a debtor to do the whole law. Christ became of no effect unto you. Whosoever of you are justified by the law are fallen from grace. For we, through the Spirit, wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. For in Jesus Christ neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, but faith which worketh by love. So he's saying that if you live by the law, then you're a debtor to keep the whole law. You can't fail in one area of the law. And that if you think that you should live by the law, what was the point of Jesus coming? That Christ becomes of no effect to you. So you're fallen from grace, because God gave us that grace. Jesus dying on the cross gave us that covering, that grace, where we don't have to be justified by the law, because nobody could keep the law. And that showed us, the law showed us that we can't do it on our own. We needed Jesus. We need Jesus. The law can't help us. Only the Lord can. And with that, you pat yourself on the back and take a break. Good work today. This is the end of day 1 of week 6. And I think we all need a pat on the back. If we are still trucking along with this study, I'm so proud of us. If you've fallen behind, I'm still proud of you. Just catch up. It's okay. And I look forward to talking with y'all tomorrow about day 2. Have a good night.